countdown?
No. What do you mean countdown? Come on now.
Can't-
This is on the fly webcasting.
uh, okay.
I was like joking, like, I need like one of those like on-air signs right outside my office.
Yeah.
Just like blinking, like, dude.
I need one that's 24/7. All right, guys, I'm going to tune out, but be listening in. So have fun, Michael. I'm looking forward to
Okay,
this.
great. Yeah. Do we want to do just wait another 5 minutes, or should we get
Yeah,
started?
you can just introduce yourself and just give us a little bit of idea who you are and what you do. And by that time, we can kind of go ahead and kick in and start.
Great. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everyone for showing up. I'm Michael Caputo. I currently work in the defense industry as a electrical engineer, but my passion for art has led me to you guys. I know a few of you guys in the attendees listing. I've taken a few classes of yours with you guys, and hopefully one day I could break in as a visual development artist, and also do more focusing on color lighting, keyframe illustration, and more on those topics as well. So yeah, it was great. It's great being part of this online school, this tribe. It's great that I met Travis as well through the courses that I've taken at Concept Art Workshop, and this is like the next chapter. So it's gonna be fun, and hopefully you guys benefit from these webinars that we do every so often, and just talk about art.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's great to finally get to sit down and chat with you, Jason, Martin, and then also you, Ken. So
Yeah,
you
it's
guys
right
are
back.
very prolific. Oh yeah, for sure. So and we'll dive into it more as we get into this interview. So
yeah, it's great to be here. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
all right, so I think we can get started. So just once again, thanks again everyone for joining in to this conversation with Jason Martin and Ken Fairclough. Is that what it is, or Fairclough?
Fairclough.
Okay, there you go. Our special guest is Jason Martin. He's a lead character artist at id Software in Dallas, Texas. Some game titles that he's worked on is Doom, Bioshock 2, Dragon Age, Mass Effect 2, to name a few. And one thing I'd like to touch on later on is that you are a United States Air Force veteran. That's a
Yes.
pretty cool feat.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
and just speaking from I'm a personal military brat. My dad was he's a retired U.S. Air Force as well, so it'd be kind of nice, and we'll touch on that later in the conversation.
Sure, I look forward to it.
Yeah, and then also we have over at Bioware's Austin, Texas location, we have Ken Fairclough. Some game titles that he's worked on is Star Citizen, Mass Effect Andromeda, and Bioware's most anticipated new IP, Anthem. So thanks again for joining us, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for awesome intro.
Oh, thank you. So Jason and Ken, were you both originally from Texas, or are you Texas transplants?
Transplant here on my end.
Yeah, it's also a transplant, like most people in Austin.
I see.
I grew up. I originally grew up in Long Island, New York, and then kind of made my way in a few different states to settle down and plant some roots here in Austin.
Yeah. So my story is similar to Ken's. I'm originally from like Manchester, Maryland, which is right out north of Baltimore, and I've slowly myself migrated to Texas with a lot of stops along the way.
Mm.
Great. And then are those stops, were they various studios, or was it?
No, most of my studio experience has been Los Angeles and here in Dallas, but most of that traveling has been like either school or military.
Okay. And then for you, Ken, was it the same story, just not art related, or were you in the industry already?
No, it was actually a mix of school, going to college, and then a few years later going to grad school, and then having a short stint working in the ad industry in New York, and then yeah, getting my first game job here in Austin, working on Star Citizen.
Well, that's cool. I mean, you were doing ad work, and then you made that transition into the game industry. Was there any extra education involved, or did you do like, say, like schooling for that?
Well, I had originally I had studied art, and it was kind of like an in between thing while trying to land my first gig, and I had worked retail and stuff like that, and I was starting to get to the point where I needed to make some money, so I wanted to try something else out that would kind of hold me over in the meantime, but it turned out just being absolutely, like, I was terrible at the job. I was really giving it my all, and I was just absolutely terrible at the job. So I left that job after a short period of time, and at that point, I kind of I knew that there was nothing else out there for me other than working in the game industry. So
Sure. And we'll get back to it. I mean, we'll look over your career background, both you and Jason and Ken. But yeah, let's bring it back to the good old Lone Star State of Texas. So how do you guys like it? I mean, how long have you lived in Austin, Ken?
I've been in Austin about 4 years.
Okay. And this is the first city in Texas that you've resided in?
Yes, it's the first city in Texas I've lived in, and I personally love it here. I've traveled to a few other cities in Texas, but yeah, I really love Austin. Like I had mentioned briefly before, I've put roots in here, so I have no plans on leaving if it's up to me at least.
Sure. And what do you like about Austin? Is it the culture, or?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of things. I think it's definitely there is definitely a kind of creative culture in the city, and the city itself is kind of like the perfect mix of still somewhat of a small kind of tight knit city, but with kind of the amenities and all the other I guess like activities of a big city. So although it is growing incredibly fast, but yeah, it's I think it's kind of the best of both worlds, and I think there is I think Austin is kind of known for having this really unique kind of character, and it's one that I identify with very much. So yeah, I really like it here.
Great to hear. And also, is what are the other studios in the area, if any, in Austin primarily?
So there's actually quite a few, and it's growing pretty rapidly. So I think the big like AAA studios, just off the top of my head, I might miss one, are Bioware, and then obviously also the other EA studios, and then there is Arcane, along with the other Bethesda studios that are also in that building. I can't recall off the top of my head.
Battle Cry is the other one.
Yes, Battlecry. Yes, thank you. And then let's see, there is Certain Affinity. There's Rooster Teeth, Gunfire Games. There's quite a few, and there's even more indies and startups popping up really at a pretty rapid rate.
Oh, that's great. And then also, is there like local meetups among you guys out there, among the artists working at those studios?
There's a few. So there's a few that I actually attend, not as much as I would like, but every once in a while, we have like sketch groups where we meet up and kind of just meet up at a Starbucks and sketch, which is really great. And there's tons of other meetups. There's like, there's Austin Game Dev meetup. There's like kind of like a beer night where they kind of meet up at one of the bars and stuff like that once a month. It's really great. And I think that also kind of speaks a little bit to the city itself. And I don't know, maybe Jason, it's similar in Dallas, but again, because it's not like a huge city, but there's a pretty like big amount of industry people. Like it's like a really tight knit community where like everyone kind of says, like in the game industry, everyone knows everyone, or everyone knows someone who knows someone. It's like even more so at an even more like granular scale in Austin.
Oh, wow.
Like everyone really, like almost everyone knows everyone.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. I mean, that's something we always look forward to, having artists of like minds just connect and always stay in touch. And then for you, Jason, as well, how is it in Dallas? Are there studios local to you?
Oh yeah. We got a few. I don't think we have as many as Austin, but besides id, there's where Gearbox is probably the biggest. Besides us, we also have like Robot, some VR stuff, Playful. I think Oculus still has a small office out here. Maybe, I'm not sure. Dude, I know I'm missing some too. But like I'm thinking of like we have a game dev drink up too also, so that's why I'm thinking about all the people that usually come to that. Like once a month, we go to the local watering hole here and get together. I try to go as much as I can, but sometimes life gets in the way. But yeah, I think we have a good community going on up here, and I'd like to see it grow more and more.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And is you guys mostly stay within a studio, or is it some jumping around for some of the artists out there, over at Dallas or even at Austin?
A lot of people here. The interesting thing is, like Ken mentioned, like I think the big draw to come to Texas, at least for me, is to put down roots. Like I like the cost of living out here is tremendous. There's a lot of good incentives for like more family oriented things for you. And I live kind of far. I grew up like I did the city thing before, and I grew up in the country, and now I live like out in the sticks. I mean, I love that's one thing I like it about here. But the cool thing is that you can have the best of both worlds. You can live close to a lot of cool stuff. Dallas is a little bit more spread out than Austin, so there's a little bit more driving involved. But there's tons of cool stuff to do all around, and the community's pretty good. As far as like, there's not much. Honestly, a lot of people stick with the studios. I don't see many people. There's some overlap where some guys work at Gearbox and came over to id, or id guys worked and went over to Gearbox. But there's a lot of loyalty actually in those studios locally.
So most likely, it's not as volatile compared to, say, in other areas of industry where it's just like, okay, here's your contract, you work this amount of time, and then you're on to your next job. So kind of a job retention, a lot of, hopefully, that's okay, great, I can put my roots down, and then, balance a little bit of have a work-life balance.
Yeah,
Would you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, that's what drug me out of here, just because I could afford a home. I mean, I love living in LA. I like that was like I loved it and hated it in the same breath, if that makes any sense. But once I had a family, I was like, I just couldn't do the tiny apartment with my daughter running around. So I had like me getting here was kind of random actually. I wasn't even thinking about it. And then some old Blur guys were out here, Jeremy Cook and Tim Wallace, and I knew they were working at ID. And I started talking to them one day, and the next thing I know, I'm flying out here for an interview, and the rest is history. It's been 7 years later.
Wow, that's cool. What a great story. And so you were originally from Blur. I mean, previous to ID, you were at Blur, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So now living in LA, and then now you live in the state of Texas. So what's the cost of living variation or deviance? I'm pretty sure it's much more affordable, right?
Uh,
Oh
si-
And-
Significant, like what I pay for a 2,500 square foot home with a pool. I paid more to live, about the same for a 700 square foot 2 bedroom apartment.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Like you'd mentioned it like briefly, but I'm kind of in the situation now where I'm going to be in the market for like looking for a home, and it's just anywhere else like in LA or even in like Seattle, it would be way more difficult with the resources like that I have available currently. So it's yeah, the cost of living is tremendously less out here. I don't know about Dallas, but at least in Austin, it does seem to be kind of increasing in like a steady rate. But it's even still like at the rate that it is increasing, it's still like nowhere near.
Oh yeah, it's increased a lot here too. Like my first home that I purchased years ago here, like I look at what it costs now after selling it, and what it's worth. It's just like mind numbing. I also bought when I first came out here in the downturn. It was like 2011. So
And just for kicks and giggles, how's the traffic out in Dallas and Austin compared to LA?
nothing compared to LA, but I will say that there is a mass amount of like I mean, it's not comparable to LA, but I mean there is a
Yeah,
lot of people moving here, and it is getting
sure.
worse. They're not.
Yeah,
Like,
I hate traffic. I really really hate traffic. So I intentionally moved to an apartment that was like a 3 minute drive from my office, so I have
oh, nice.
virtually no commute.
There you go. That's what's up. That's what I'm saying, man. I mean, you imagine that, right? Like in LA. So, I mean, I'm not from LA, but from the people I've talked to, at least, they're stuck in traffic for what, 1 to 2 hours, more than 2 hours. That's time wasted. I mean, you could use that time for something else.
Especially if you want
Definitely.
to have a home in LA, because you got to live way north. But I
Yeah,
mean, unless you're like I don't know, unless you're very fortunate, but you can't live anywhere. You can't afford I mean, you can rent, but I mean, like having a house or anything, like you got to that the commute is a brutal. At
right.
least all my friends and ex coworkers that have homes in LA, it's a commute.
Okay. And then also, aside from games, is there any other like maybe some VFX studios out there, or even on the tech side,
Yeah,
or
actually,
art? Yeah.
Dallas, yeah. I mean, Dallas has Real Effects Animation Studio, did Book of Life,
Oh yeah. Okay.
uh, uh, and a lot of other stuff that I can't come to my front of my mind at the moment. But yeah, they do a lot of work on, and they're in Deep Ellum area in Dallas.
And then as for you, Ken, is there
Yeah, like
anything
out
like that?
here. Oh yeah. Yeah, so there's Troublemaker Studios, which is Robert Rodriguez's film studio, and there's Rooster Teeth, who they do all kinds of stuff. And then in terms of like other tech companies, there's so many. Um, just in like the area where the office I work in is like there's like PayPal, eBay. Uh, like Oracle. I think over near our old office there was Amazon was there. I think Austin is in the running for like the new Amazon headquarters too.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Gotcha.
it's I think that is like a big factor in the rate in which the city and the cost of living is increasing is just all the tech companies that are opening up here. it's there's a ton.
And are you starting to see those trends where everything's starting to rise, whether linearly or exponentially? Just the incoming people, a variety of people coming into the state from other places as well.
Yeah, I feel like in Austin, it's like it's rare that you meet someone who's a native Austinite.
Okay, there you go.
At least in my experience, like it seems like everyone I meet is like no one is actually originally from Austin. Like everyone has just moved here in the last 15 or less years.
Cool. Yeah, and I think the next thing I'd like to touch on is just where you guys work at. We can talk about where you work at right now, Bioware, Ken. Just how the studio is, the environment, and what's it like?
Oh yeah, it's a great studio to work at. I really love working there, and we have a really great office, and obviously the projects that we get to work on are awesome. I mean, growing up, BioWare games were some of my favorite games like Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect and Dragon Age. So just to be able to kind of like work with those people who had to do with some of those projects that like I was a huge fan of when I was a kid is just like such an awesome experience. And being able to work on those projects is just really, really incredible. I'm really fortunate. It's I would say the atmosphere there too is I would say it's similar at a lot of game studios and I think it just speaks to the type of people game developers and game artists are in general is there is this like kind of like consistent kind of drive and push to learn and try and be the best that you can be, and like everyone kind of like at the same time trying to work towards being the best artist or the best developer or whatever that they can, kind of just like really motivates each other. And it's just really great being able to work with people who are really passionate about their work on the day-to-day basis, but then also have like side projects at home that they're really passionate about, and just having people to share new techniques with and just constantly kind of learn from is really incredible. I would say it's similar probably at a lot of studios, and again I think it just speaks to the kind of people game developers are.
Yeah, it's like going to school every day. I mean, free education, huh? I mean, pretty much.
Yeah,
How about you, Jason? Over at id Software, how is it there?
Oh, it's awesome, man. I mean, it's been a really great experience. I mean, our IPs alone are great, I mean, hold on a second here, my monitor's blinked out. Okay, so it's been an awesome experience. I've been here for almost, I can't even believe I want to say it, 7 years. It's coming up on 7 years. And it sounds crazy. It seems like 3 years to me. But getting to work on Doom is just awesome. I mean, I still remember '94, sneaking off to my friend's dad's kitchen business to play Doom on his brand new Gateway Pentium, like hiding it from his dad. He was afraid we get in trouble for playing it. And, to be able to work on that IP like 20 years later is just, I mean, I sometimes joke about like if I would have known that as a kid, that would have blown my mind, my future. So like I'm incredibly blessed and fortunate to be a part of this. So it's been a just great experience, and like as a modeler and sculptor, man, make demons and biomechanical stuff and monsters, sign me up forever.
Nice. And so you're a lead character artist, right, at id
Yes,
Software?
yes, I am. Yes.
And then what is the day like for you as that position?
It's great. I mean, I work with an awesome team. I mean, Emmanuel Palik, he's like our junior mid-level. Denzel O'Neill is our senior, and we have a tech guy helping us now, Ahmed. and we also have Evgeny Bischoff and Peter Baum working off-site for us. So getting to work with, I mean, Ken touched on this a little bit. Getting to work with people that constantly push you is everything. Like, you know, you're forever a student as an artist, and you got to keep pushing. The moment you stop, you know, it's just that's pretty much it's over. So it's always working with people like that push you, and I think that's the best experience. So most part of the day is just coming in and like there's a good bit of meetings and stuff like that. Obviously, when you're running a team like that, but honestly, I go with the mentality of you treat your good guys right, the machine will run itself, and it's just a great experience working with all those guys. Like I'm ultimately not much at all without a good team behind me. So
Yes, the perpetual level of you know, education and whatnot, learning from each other. And
yeah,
so part of it, do you, I mean, part of your time spent during the day is managing other artists, or are you just on your own, doing your own
no,
work?
I mean I do some managing of stuff like that, but I always refer to I like still being a soldier and I like being in the trenches. So I mean I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't doing a ton of art. So I still have like a normal amount of workload as everybody else. I just pad my schedule slightly for because most of my interruptions are you know, I gotta go to a couple meetings, you know, maybe 2-3 hours a day, maybe four sometimes you're spent dealing with, you know, like meetings or helping other artists. I have a lot of senior talent on my team, so I only really have one junior guy, but we do have another guy starting here soon, so that'll take up a little bit more time. But for the most part, I'm still making art constantly, and I prefer that, you know. That's just my
Mhm.
personal taste.
And as a character artist, you do most like, say, modeling primarily, or you do it all? I mean, modeling, texturing, whatnot?
The whole pipeline, modeling,
Okay.
texturing, all the way through the whole like system. I mean, we have a traditional pipeline with some really awesome concept artists worked out on paper. You know, once the design is approved, they'll go to us, and we'll model that through the pipeline all the way to the in-game asset.
Okay, great. And then moving on to you, Ken, as a concept artist at Bioware, how's your day like?
I mean, it's it's kind of like your typical day that you would expect from a concept artist. It's, you know, getting a brief or some task and kind of, you know, working with the art director on kind of establishing what the overall direction is, like what are the key problems that we need to solve in that design or that image, whatever. And then going and kind of talking to all the stakeholders, you know, so anyone who that concept might affect down down the line, you know, talking to them and making sure that I'm aware of what their needs are. As an environment concept artist, that's typically the environment modelers, the environment artists, and the level designers. Because ultimately, as a concept artist, it's, you know, obviously, like on the surface, like our job is to, you know, design the look and feel of the game and then the individual assets. But it really at its core job is to make everyone else's job easier who's going to be working with that specific design or that task or whatever. So you know, making sure that I'm taking everything into account that I can possibly get, you know, just getting as much information as I can, really before ever putting pen to paper or pen to tablet. It's really all about just getting as much information as possible and doing my research. So much of it is comes down to research and like reference collecting and trying to kind of figure out how you can approach a specific design problem or a task in a way that kind of challenges the preconceived, so that you're you know, not necessarily going with your first idea or what is necessarily expected, right? So yeah, a lot of it is that kind of that planning, and then from there it's kind of, you know, depending on the task at hand, it's, you know, the technique or the tools used really really vary. It's I would say it's rare that, you know, I go from one task to the next, and the workflow is exactly the same. It really varies so much, and that's that's one of the many things that I love about my job is that um, uh, you know, every day is going to bring some new challenge and some new way of tackling a problem. Um, but yeah, that's pretty typical day, I would say.
That's cool. Could we, by any chance, see some of your images or your thought process images that you have on your screen right now?
Sure. So you're able to see my screen, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, let's see. Well, I can kind of go through a little bit of more of some of my personal work, just to kind of like really briefly go over kind of, I guess, typically how I like to work through a design.
Okay.
But it always starts with, you know, just really simple sketches. More often than not, I prefer to sketch in a sketchbook rather than in Photoshop, but they always start with just really simple sketches or thumbnails, either focusing on like establishing just an initial direction or kind of a shape language. And like I really try to make sure that I'm not really focusing on making a necessarily a good drawing or like a good image. I'm really just more like just working through the design and trying to kind of find that hook, right? And it's that thing that I can kind of latch onto, right? That'll kind of drive all of my decisions going forward.
And
Um,
I think, and when you mention the read, right, and that's the visual cue, it's the overall shape design or shape language, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So like, you know, stuff like this, for example, the way I treat these and approach these kind of really quick thumbnail sketches, whether it's
Hey
like a
guys,
line sketch or just like a quick kind of like brush sketch in Photoshop, are kind of the same. Like it's really pulled back view and just really about establishing the overall shape and tone. And then from there, I can kind of really hone in on the individual parts that make it up.
hey Ken,
Um,
real
yeah.
quick, sorry to interrupt. You got your
No worries.
Explorer window open. Are you on a dual monitor setup? Because I think you might be showing the wrong screen.
Oh, okay.
There, yeah. You want to switch it to the images you're clicking on because we just see your Explorer.
Ah, okay. Sorry.
That's okay. No worries.
All right. So, let me go back. So, were you able to see these?
Oh, we can see it now. Yeah.
Now we can see
Okay.
it. That's it.
Ah, okay. So I've been scrolling through images for the last 10 minutes. So you haven't seen any of those?
I was just imagining that. That's what it
All right. I
was.
guess I was sharing the wrong screen.
Sorry, guys.
Oops. Well, yeah. Again, like I said, you know, it's all about just kind of establishing just like a really just high level kind of direction. And I'm not really concerning myself too much with like making a quote unquote like a good drawing or a good design. It's really just about kind of getting the expected shapes and decisions like out first. And whether it's a line drawing like this or more of a kind of just quick, you know, blockout sketch like this, the way I approach it is kind of the same. Whether, you know, it's all just about like again, like I said, finding that hook, right? And then from
Right.
here, you know, you would typically, you know, collect reference and stuff like that. And so much of my process is, you know, revolves around the use of 3D. And I just for years I really was kind of apprehensive and a little intimidated by introducing 3D into my workflow. And you know, once I got over that kind of like initial fear, it really kind of just opened up so many possibilities in really just being versatile and having so many different ways of tackling a problem. So here's an example of like a really quick block out that was just done with like really simple like displacement maps. Like I'm really big on kind of closing that gap between that integration of 2D and 3D. So I rarely am like kind of working just in 3D poly modeling. Like it's usually kind of some way of bridging the two. So designing two-dimensionally from like a top-down view and kind of creating um, masks that I can use for displacement, and then just doing a really quick sketch on top of that, just to kind of see like, you know, put my future glasses on and kind of see like what the end result might possibly look like before I even go in and start really refining any of those designs. And it's just through stuff like, you know, here's another example of the idea of kind of bridging that workflow of designing in 2D and 3D simultaneously. Um, like here is, you know, something that, you know, just intentionally designing 100% two-dimensionally, just experimenting with shapes and then using those same exact shapes to extract 3D shapes from. You know, to model that same thing probably wouldn't take that long, but just being able to design and make those tweaks on the fly in Photoshop and then just like quickly extract that into 3D Geo is just something that is just really, it's just really intuitive. And I've found that so many of the techniques that I've adapted over the years are all about ways of getting over my laziness, essentially, and cut corners. I mean, so I guess so much of it is really it's just, and then, you know, doing that enough over time just kind of like really streamlines it, and yeah, it's, but again, not to ramble too long on this topic, but for me, it's just bridging that gap of designing 2D and 3D and approaching design three-dimensionally in a way that is as intuitive as sketching on paper. Because I think really that's when you get the most out of the tools themselves. So.
And do you think that do you believe first in using your imagination versus using reference first?
I am huge on using reference, but I do think that it is sometimes it's beneficial to kind of just see where your own kind of ideas can take you as like a starting point. But then, at least for me, like I'm always big on then taking that and then distilling that down to, you know, identifying things that are relatable in the real world, certain shapes or certain types of architecture or you know, anything that I could find, even if it relates to something that isn't necessarily literally the same as that, even if it means like grounding a certain design in terms of, you know, say for example, modeling a specific type of architecture. Sometimes it means something is just like referencing like animal anatomy in a way of grounding that shape language in a way that's a little bit more approachable and relatable. So I'm really big on functionality and grounding designs in a way that looks believable and is taking into account how something might be built or who they might be built by. Yeah. So yeah.
And do you
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. No, I was just wondering, do you do studies of your reference?
Yeah. So typically when I do that, it's kind of the thumbnail sketch phase that I had showed you earlier with like those line drawings. In a way, that's kind of what I'm doing is like I'm trying to see how much information I can extrapolate from the reference and kind of put that through my own visual library filter and then see what comes out in the thumbnails. So in a way, it is kind of a study because I'm intentionally kind of examining what are the things that make that piece of reference stand out as something that I could use or reference. Like, what is it, you know, what are the things that embody that object or that piece of reference that I can kind of extract and then embody my own designs with.
And more so, I mean, it helps you build that visual library, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And most of the time, when we're working through environments, you get a feel for your lighting, just how you work through it out, right? I mean, you use 3D pretty much for that, or do you have some sort of lighting guide in mind?
Um, I mean, for me, like I typically have somewhat of an idea of the lighting that I want to go with, but the great thing with using 3D is you're no longer kind of like restricted to whatever you've decided to go like forward moving with, right? So working purely two-dimensionally, if I had spent 5 or 6 hours blocking out a certain lighting scenario, if I change my mind or I want to try something else, it means repainting it. Whereas, I might have a specific idea in mind, but
Hmm.
then I realize when I've actually got those shapes in front of me three-dimensionally, I might realize, hey, you know what? These surfaces actually light better in this lighting scenario. Or, hey, like maybe I can move this, light over here. So it just really kind of like, blows the lid off of being able to just iterate on your own work to come to the best possible final result.
Great. Yeah, cool. And then also we haven't heard from Jason in a while. Hey, Jason.
Hey, how's it going?
How
I'm
you
just
doing?
enjoying listening to everything, to be
Yeah.
honest with
Yeah, I mean, we would like to talk about, how your approach to things as well. In a similar way as I presume, just the sketching out ideas and gathering reference.
you. Oh, totally. Like, well, it's a little different. Like, as a character modeler in a production environment, like you're really an artisan. So I like to use the term like I'm a professional artisan and amateur designer. Otherwise, I'd be a concept artist. So I'm always pushing my design elements on the side, and that doesn't mean we don't. There's plenty of place to do design and character artists in our field also, though, because there's a million times you get a 2D design on paper that sometimes they're super fleshed out, sometimes they're rough, and you need to be able to fill in the gap. So I think it's very, very important for character artists to always work on the design on the side, because it will always help fill in the gap and help bridge the gap between 2D and 3D. So much like Ken had mentioned, I approach stuff with I get as much information as I can. What is this character going to do? How's he seen? What's the prioritization of the character? As in, like, is he background? Is he main story? I mean, like, what are you going to see him? Are you going to see him mostly from the chest up? You got to pick your battles, so to speak. And then once
Hmm.
I get all that information, then I get my reference. And reference is everything. Like, especially for character art, like you should always be referencing something out there. I mean, literally, I have an image board. I teach this in my class. The first thing I do is we can make an image board of what we're going to make, and we always have it up and reference it. So that's my main thing in the beginning. Approaching problems is like, what's it going to be? What's it going to do? How's it going to act? And even when it comes to like my personal work, like I'm seeing you looking through some of these like this dragon and whatnot, like I always try to just come up with stuff like as unique as I possibly can, or something I haven't really seen out there. And really, I just really try to polish my design skills at home on personal work, and then push my job as being a really good just a character modeler as an artist and bringing characters to life. It's a very collaborative team effort, from the initial pitch idea from the character and the story element all the way down to concept, digging their teeth into it, then giving it to us, and then us bringing that character to life. I mean, it's never just a one person show. It's multiple. It's a lot of people involved. That's what makes it great.
And yeah, and at id software, how's the level of style, like in terms of like photorealism? What do you guys shoot for?
Well, I think I always like to use this example. I mean, we want something to look as real as possible, but we also want to look campy. Doom's meant to be fun. I personally like projects where it's like 70% realism, 30% pushed in the stylized area. Like, I love realistic textures on like crazy, like, proportional stuff. That's pretty much my favorite. I'd like photoreal, but not realistic, proportions and stuff like that. Slightly exaggerated. Like, honestly, like Doom characters, they're all a little bit bizarre and pushed and odd. Um, and that's the stuff that like I don't know if that helps answer the question, but yeah.
And do you get a chance to review the incoming portfolios to your studio?
Oh yes, as a matter of fact, I'm doing that right now.
Oh, are you? Are you?
Yeah, it's
Um,
got a lot because we're hiring for a senior character position.
okay, well there you go. And from what you've seen at least, one of the questions was, what do you think is lacking in student or junior work that apply at ID?
It's a really good question. I This is the one thing I tell everybody. I talk about this much in my class, but I'll give this pitch real quick. If you're trying to be a character artist at a studio, like if so, you have a portfolio and you want to apply at a studio you really want to work for. I would always say make one character in a style of that studio, and then the other characters would be like a roundabout thing. Like have one creature, one guy in gear, because every studio makes dudes in gear, so you can't go wrong there. And then and one something a little bit stylized, so you have three rounded out characters, and then you can have one that's maybe like that's in one of those three you could pick to cater towards the studio you really want to work at. And what I find lacking is probably, you know what, honestly, I'll say it like it is. There's a lot of people out there to get in this industry right now that wants to do like 3D concept stuff, but they don't really learn like the whole character game production pipeline, and like I can't really work with that too much. So if it's a junior position, I want to see have at least one full game character on in your portfolio that demos that you know the entire process. If you have that, and then the other stuff can be sculpts. I mean, this question will be answered differently by any lead, any other studios, specifically what they look for. But that's all I want to look for. I'm initially looking for in a junior, someone that knows the process, that knows it well, and as well as they can. Obviously, you're talking about a junior position, and demonstrates that little bit of proficiency and understands a traditional 3D app. I know we all love ZBrush. I just recently converted to fully modeling everything in ZBrush, hard surface with ZModeler and everything. But you still need to know a 3D package like a traditional one. So sometimes I see kids that just don't know that stuff, and like you need to have that to really get your foot in the door in a production environment.
So big thing, versatility, right?
Yeah, I mean that too. Yeah, I'd be honest with you. Yes, I mean it's tough too because we're also entering an age where people specialize. At ID, like we do it all. Like all the character guys do hard surface and organic. That's just part of how we do things. It's very tough when people diversify. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a trend that's happening. It's hard to be really great at both. It's actually challenging for me to find artists that can do both equally. Now, equally is a bad term. Like you should never neglect like one side or the other. Like most people usually rise in one area, like better organics can still do hard surface, or better hard surface they can do some organic. I wouldn't expect I don't put anybody through that ringer. I just definitely need to be able to see both, and as long as and a willingness to commit to learn, more of the other. And I think it benefits everybody as an artist. It's the more you know, the better off you're going to be.
And for character artists applying for its software, should they just focus more on character art, or should they at least show some decent props?
I don't really look. I mean, props to me usually ends up being kind of like hard surface stuff, which helps. I always say like that's a good question actually because there's not a lot of getting your foot in this industry is tough. So I understand like it depends on it. Like someone wants to be either I want to be a character artist and nothing's gonna stop me. I want to be a character artist. I would say focus on character work. If you want to just get in the industry, do character work and prop work, a lot of people's entry is through prop work, and they build up and they work on the character side. It may take you longer to break into the character thing, but you would have a job in the industry. It's kind of like, what's important to you. And prop work's super freaking important, dude. Like, oh my God, like people do the weapons and all that other stuff. And I think sometimes people don't think about that, but it's like, I mean, there's some amazing, amazing talented prop guys out there, especially when it comes to weapons.
Cool. Yeah. And then, just to touch on, we were talking about, you were in the military and all that, it's discipline. It's all about leadership. It's all about teamwork, and how much of that carries into what you do at id Software.
Oh, that's huge. Like I never thought. The funny thing is about the military is like, I spent many years in the Air Force before I transitioned to art. I never remember leaving thinking like, well, I'll never really use this in the outside world. But everything that I was taught, because I was the rank of staff sergeant for a good while and ran crews and stuff like that in the Air Force on the flight line, working on F-15s and F-16s as on weapon systems. But a lot of that managing and dealing with people translates 100% into the real world, especially even in art, because people are people. I found that surprising at first, but it's been hugely beneficial in my career. I absolutely, I mean, my military experience was amazing. I wouldn't trade it for the world, and it translated beautifully, to be honest with you.
Great. Yeah. And I mean, you're managing I mean, for example, say like your modeling department, what's the number of people within your team?
Well, right now we have 5 plus me. 2 are off-site though, and which is, that's good though. I like it that way because like you get to really know your guys, and you don't have like a lot of people. And also, like I said earlier, it makes me do art. The bigger a team gets, the more it's going to need hands-on and the less art you're going to do. So I'm very fortunate to be in a position where I have only a small but good group of guys, and a lot of them are senior guys, which are very set and forget. Like I don't really have to interact that much besides when we go through reviews. I mean, like there's daily interactions for sure, but I mean like they're just so good. They're the kind of guys like I mentioned earlier. You walk in and you see their work, and you're like, "Hot damn, dude! Like that's amazing." It really motivates you to kick ass too. So it's like that awesome, friendly, positive, competitive environment. Yeah, like that's a huge part of it.
Great. Well, we would like to go into class summaries. So, did you have your screen ready, Jason?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I can share if you want to.
Okay. Well, let me switch over to you.
Does that work?
Yep. Good. We can see it.
So as far as like my class, this is just some random stuff I was working on, and I just have like Travis sent some rough ZBrush sketch stuff of this Travis shared on actually to this webinar. I'm getting this in QShot now, but I mean this is like my class is more generated about and this is just a rough thing in QShot. I'll eventually take this into Photoshop and do its thing, but as far as like what to look forward to and what to get out of my class and stuff like that, generally what I like to do, and it's good for all character art, is as much as like we're basically going to create a monster, and I'd like to have the monster in some kind of gear or yeah, like sci-fi fantasy. I keep it really loose and open, but creating any kind of creature with props and stuff like that. Now, generally I prefer bipedal for that kind of thing, but I keep the door open to a lot of options. But I like to be able to take a character with gear, any kind of monster element to it, sci-fi or fantasy, and we take it through the entire process from sketching the early beginning thing to just real quick ZBrush sketches all the way down to the game pipeline. And my whole main goal to you all, everybody, is to give you bite-sized knowledge chunks that you can really digest and take out of here, not in the sense of overwhelming you with process and like this is how you do tips and tricks and like like a bunch of technical stuff like that. I mean, that stuff will be touched on, but the things I like to really get off my chest in this class and off to you all is that none of it's that difficult. I don't have any convoluted processes. Everything's pretty straightforward ZBrush. I don't have like a bunch of scripts or fancy brushes. I use a lot of stuff right out of the box as ZBrush. And I really like to just throw those like bite-sized morsels out that you remember and they stick. It's not like overloading you with information. And also like, like a lot of my design principles and tools you can put inside your toolbox to help you evaluate your 3D model along the way of like what's working, what isn't working, why does this proportion look off, like how to basically a set of rules that you can apply to your character to help the design and overall look and feature of it work through the whole process. You can either work from your own design, which I heavily like to push, but if you're not comfortable with that, you can always pick a design off the internet, like any 2D thing, and bring that to life. I've taught a couple classes before, and people have done a little bit of both. I have no problem with that. I encourage to work on your own design because, like I said, I think it just makes you a stronger artist all around. But that's just a basic tidbit of what you expect. And generally, also, it's worth noting, I usually try to start the class modeling with you guys. So I usually start the process the same way and go. And I try to keep up. I tend to fall way behind and not able to do it. But I'm able to demo all the process of like model creation of what I do on that character, or I bring in older models and demo live. But I always like the beginning couple weeks because I'm usually right there keeping pace with you guys until the good old work comes calling and I can't keep up. But I really like doing that. It's fun because I feel like I'm part of the class. And like I said, like I'm always a student too, man. Like I learn a lot from even like students, just like of interacting and whatnot. Like you're forever as an artist, you should always be a student. You will be to end. You know, it's a race you'll never win until we die. You know, like it's always it's a journey. It's a lifelong journey, in my opinion. So that's just a kind of a high level taste of what we can get out of my course and whatnot. And I just wanted to just, you know, share a quick little doodle I was working on and trying to get this process out.
And is this class good for all types of artists?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's like how I try to treat the course is I never try to leave anybody behind. I usually kind of touch base and everything, but in the same for advanced or intermediate students, I don't like to drown them with boring like basics stuff. So on stuff that's like super technical, I'll cover it. And what I like to point out is if anybody's nervous about like, oh, I don't know this or whatever like that, I still make it a point to keep you on board. And usually I'll touch base after class or get people up to snuff with certain aspects of the modeling. But I feel like I do a broad range. I think it can cover a lot of aspects. So nobody has felt like, an advanced student isn't bored to death. We're not going to spend like a whole class on UV and something. You know what I mean? Like it's stuff like that. We'll broadly skim over. And like I said, I really like to focus on the fun, big, important chunks so you get the most out of it.
Great to hear. And as we near the end of this webcast, just a quick note on Ken. Just a little bit of class summary on your end.
Sure. Go ahead and share something I've got open up in KeyShot as well.
Okay, let me get you.
Let's see. So yeah, so this is actually something that I've been working on over the last few days as well. But in terms of like an overview of the class, it's actually, I think the way I'm approaching this class is similar to Martin in that, Jason, in that I'm really focusing on just kind of bite-sized chunks. I think it's going to be really great to kind of go through the class at somewhat of a quick pace to intentionally simulate the type of switching techniques and switching tools on the fly that you would expect when working in on a project using these tools. Because again, like I had mentioned earlier, the way you approach a design or a task very well could be completely different on a daily basis. And I'm really big on knowing a little bit about a lot of things in regards to tools, because you don't necessarily have to be like a master of any of these tools to get by as a concept artist. And I think one of the great things about being a concept artist is it's all about just knowing enough to make your job easier and to help communicate that idea as best as possible. So the format of the class is going to be really just a series of like vignettes of like zooming in on these specific techniques and showing like practical uses of these techniques in creating a high fidelity environment concept. I think also presenting those techniques from kind of like a pulled back, like high level perspective, so that you can kind of start to see, even though I'll be showing very specific examples of how to use these techniques, they'll be kind of framed in a way that will be kind of somewhat like pulled back. So you can kind of see how you'd be able to use those tools and those techniques on your own work. Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be very quick, very fast paced, but it's going to be all about approaching techniques that are really either very contemporary and widely used now, or B, are not necessarily as widely used in a production setting yet, but probably will be. Also just, oh geez, I lost my train of thought. Oh yes, using, let me see, close this. Yeah, so geez, I had something else that I wanted to say and I completely lost it. Well, if it comes back, I'll make sure to post it in the group page. But essentially, the whole idea of the class is these series of vignettes of zooming in on these very specific techniques. Yes, okay, sorry. So a lot of the other techniques that I wanted to focus on are ones that are like very widely used, but it's using them in a different way, or using them in kind of somewhat of an unexpected way to get really great results that I'm not really seeing that many other people doing. And the results that you can get are really great and can really improve your efficiency and your speed, while also helping you create really high fidelity images. So a lot of the techniques I'll be showing are techniques that have been around for a long time, but just kind of like a different way of approaching them and using those same tools. So, yeah.
Cool. It's going to be exciting, and then also see what your students going to come up with.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see. We're going to be going through a lot of stuff, but yeah, I think mostly we'll be focusing on just kind of like with Jason's class, kind of bite-sized chunks, and then kind of like moving on to the next one. And we won't be getting really too caught up in technical stuff, and because I think jumping into using 3D as a concept artist can be very intimidating. So I'm all about, the simplest, most easy way of using a tool without getting into kind of convoluted, settings or plugins and stuff like that. So really just keeping it as simple as possible and presenting it in a way that isn't intimidating and really is actually really fun. Because I found with previous students, and I can see it happening with this class, is showing some things where like people like kind of didn't necessarily think of using a tool that way, and then all of a sudden they start to like kind of connect dots and say like, oh, I'd be able to use that like in this situation, like, oh, what if I did that? And then yeah, it's just really exciting and stuff like that. So I'm hoping for my excitement for all this stuff that I'm going to be showing to kind of rub off on everyone else, and for the students to do some really cool work.
Cool. Exciting. So we're near the end of our webcast, but we hopefully you guys have time for some Q&A.
Yeah, I got time.
Okay. How about you, Ken? You're all right? Okay. Well, I'll open up the floor to the audience. There's some questions reeling in the chat right now. So the first one I see is from Cesar. What's the best way to go into the mindset of designing an environment or a great dimensions prop vehicle? So mindset.
A great dimensions like prop vehicle. I don't know if that's something specific, but I guess I'll just speak to just designing an environment or a prop in general. I think it's all about establishing a really solid direction and establishing kind of rules for yourself, and in a way kind of putting yourself inside a box. I think to people who aren't artists or designers, there's this misconception that like putting yourself in a box can kind of like limit you and stifle your creativity. But in reality, when you set yourself a strict kind of set of rules and guidelines that that drive your design decisions, it really forces you to approach that problem or that design really like head on and try to come up with a solution as creatively as possible, and come up with a solution that isn't necessarily the most expected solution. So like I said previously, and Jason talked about it, it's so important having reference and doing a research and planning. So yeah, I think regardless if it's an environment or a prop or a character, it really is about just establishing a really solid direction for you and kind of getting that hook, establishing what is the thing about this that makes this different, or what is it, if this design or if this concept had a voice, what would it say, right?
Cool. And another question from Juan Hernandez. The big artist question is how to get unstuck. So we hit those plateaus of whatnot, and it's just, okay, what's the next level? How can I get past that 10%, that last 10%?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about more. Well, this probably doesn't happen to Jason as much because he has a lot of experience. But I was wondering how to get unstuck when you're trying to come up with certain shapes and they just don't work out. And I was wondering if you had any techniques for that.
I could say, like, I've been doing this forever. I still get stuck. That happens. I know in my course, I have a certain set of rules that I apply to my character down the line that I look at, and I kind of run run it through my head like checklists. So basically, like, it's that thing, like, like you look at your design and what you work on and be like, hey, something just doesn't look right, but you're not sure what it is. I have a good set of rules I've learned over the years and working with a lot of good designers and just good artists from experience that I like to teach and show off, that are like basically bite-sized chunks that like I keep saying this, but adding tools to the toolbox and how you can kind of digest the problem and and just kind of like pull out of that rut where you're like spinning off in outer space. But yeah, I plenty of times, and I even know all these things, but there's still times I get stuck. But what I usually do is either I take a break, get up and walk around, let your brain go, and you'd be surprised, in the back of your mind, your brain will solve a lot of those problems even without sitting in front of a computer. I have about a 40-minute drive home and to work, and sometimes it sucks. I'm jealous of of Ken's 3-minute commute. But what I do is I make the best of that, and it's funny how many problems where I'm sitting in front of a computer working, I'm like driving myself crazy. I'm like, well, I'm going to go home. And when I'm driving home, even though I'm like just, my brain's still chewing on the back. And sometimes just that break, that 30 minutes drive for 40, depending, my brain solves a lot of these problems, or at least I come up with a method of attack to approach it the next day, kind of deal. So breaks help. A lot of set of tools to like sit there and run your, like, why is this not working? What's broken on them? And how to and also when to know enough is enough. And but I mean, like, the cool thing about this stuff is, like, these are problems that everybody has. I don't think there's ever a point where the I win artist button where you're just cranking out stuff like without any care in the world. It's always like a good way I like to explain this to people is it's like a RPG character, like RPG character in a video game where level 1 to 10 you gain a lot really fast, and as the more you work, by level 99 or 80, higher up 60, whatever, you still gain levels, but it takes a lot more time to put in to get that level. So there's always that stuff that'll come into play, and so it's a lifelong thing. But as far as like getting stuck and whatnot in the beginning stages, like that's totally normal. But you'll still always have it your entire career, and the best way to go about it is just run basically what I just said, and run your whatever project you're working through a set of rules. It's too much for me to cover right now. I don't have any magic bullet for that. Like, I do talk about it a good bit in my class, but I'm also not trying to cheese out here on that. Like, if it was that easy, I'd just say it. But I mean, it's a lot of stuff I like to demo and like a set of rules. I actually have like literally in my courses, I have certain sections for it to discuss just these things.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Do you have anything to add, Ken?
No, I mean, essentially, I mean, yeah, the whole thing with getting unstuck, I mean, yeah, it happens to everyone. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it or what. I actually, I mean, I have not been doing this nearly as long as Jason, but I could say, at least from my own experience, I I spend most of my time stuck. It's like that little bit of unstuck where the productivity happens, I guess.
Yeah, I used to think it was a lack of reference, but I think having too much reference just made it worse.
Yeah, you can definitely have too much reference. I actually think that in most cases, it's good to have a lot of reference for like specific things, but
Mhm.
like in terms of like hierarchy of your reference, like there should be like one or two, maybe three images that kind of embody all of it, right?
Yeah, that sort of like guide you.
Yeah, like those are the three or the two like overarching images that are like driving most of like your design decisions. But then you have all these other references for like, oh, what does this like bolt here look like, or what does this connection here look like? But overall, it really should be kind of simplified down to just a few, because yeah, it could very easily just get overwhelming, and then your design could very easily get kind of convoluted and
Thanks, Ken.
So next question, Martin asks, question for Jason. How has your pipeline for personal work changed since moving from Blur, which is more cinematic based, over to id, which is much more game ready / real-time based?
Well, that's a good question. The funny thing is that I'm so busy that rarely do I get to take my personal work all the way through like the texturing process. I don't really have many good examples of that since I left the cinematic background, but um, I do have some things that work. I just never get to texturing. But honestly, the way I would do it nowadays is probably I like the hybrid workflow I see a lot of people doing where you take a pretty dense mesh, you don't worry about too much topology, and just get it in a marmoset or something. Like I have a couple models I want to do that way where I'm not super concerned with doing like a game ready mesh. I just want to get something in like a real time render as fast as possible. I'm really impressed with a lot of people that do that stuff with marmoset. And it's been my mission for a long time to actually take something all the way to the end. But over the last couple of years, I've been focused on trying to build my personal work design sense up a little bit better and stronger. So a lot of my attention on my free time in the last several years has been on getting better at creatures and monsters at home. So a lot of for that reason alone, a lot of times it ends after the ZBrush phase. But it has been my intention to take some texturing stuff all the way through the pipe, because I used to do that. Used to be my bread and butter at Blur, and I mean I do all that stuff in the games now, but I haven't done like any kind of like cinematic level. Like I haven't rendered in like a traditional like V-Ray or anything in quite a while. But the cool thing, one of the reasons why I got into games is because that line was blurring. Like the way I built everything at Blur, I mean, yeah, like I'm not using like V-Ray or all the high end or any of the GPU stuff that's getting popular now in rendering, like Redshift and all that whatnot. Is these games the texturing is pretty much PBR is pretty much the same damn thing. You're just working with like some bakes. That's about the only difference really. So I kind of scratch that itch at the day job, and at night I'm focused on my personal time. I focus more on design and whatnot. But it has been my intention to take like a personal piece all the way through the pipeline. But I just haven't done it on any personal level in a while.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. That was really good feedback.
Oh, cool, thanks.
Yeah.
Next question. Eric Prout asks, do you guys keep a personal reference library? And if so, how do you go about organizing it?
Oh, hell yeah, dude. Pinterest.
yes, Pinterest.
There you go.
Use the hell out of that, man. It should be your best friend. I add to that constantly.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And you guys like organize it like by boards and just have everything.
We didn't really touch on that. Like for me, I break it up into lately I've been super into like movie effects stuff and like traditional movie effects stuff. So basically I split it out like that. I have like mammals, creatures, movie effects, toys, hard surface, it's like bone, like rot, gross stuff. Like that kind of just break it off into like in chunks like that. Whatever makes sense at the time. And man, Pinterest is just the shit, dude. Because I can go down a rabbit hole of Pinterest. I actually use Pinterest for Google search these days because I feel like it gives me better results for what I need. I actually start with Pinterest most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree because like I love the way it handles like suggested images or similar images. Like it's true because you can start looking for something and then like within a few minutes be looking at something completely unrelated to that, but like still find really great reference. So like I always find that like searching through Pinterest is a really good way of finding like the unexpected reference because like there's so many like so much reference like where like if you were to do a Google search like it's a safe bet that like thousands of other people have used that exact same reference. So like it's always nice kind of finding something that is a little bit unexpected or maybe not as many other people have thought to use for reference. So yeah, I love Pinterest.
And are your Pinterest profiles private or is it public?
You should be able to look mine up. Another thing, dude, is like I gotta be honest with you. Sometimes I end up riffing my friends' Pinterest stuff more than my own because theirs is better than mine. I'm gonna straight up be honest about that. Like I can't tell you how many times I'm like on my Pinterest and the next thing I know I'm at Brian Winey's Pinterest and I'm like, this guy's got way more better pins than me. So I'm just gonna riff on there. Yeah, dude, I highly suggest it and like it's just awesome.
Cool. And would you mind posting it on our little group, Facebook group, both your Pinterest pages if it's free? Sure, great, thanks. Okay, and then we only have a few more minutes for a few more questions. So after this question, we'll leave it up to maybe one more. So Daniel Rios asks, what do you guys do when you're in the middle of a piece and you feel like you aren't inspired by it anymore? Do you power through it or try to redo it to be something more interesting?
I can go real quick. Take a breather from it. Usually a production environment, you don't have that choice. So you're probably, if you're working at home and a student, I can definitely see you get burned out on something. Take a breather from it. Like, honestly, it's okay to start something else, but you should get in the habit of finishing it. Like, if you need a break, it's okay to start something small, but like come back to it. Don't just abandon something. I think you learn more from getting through the problems. But it's like it's very easy, especially if you're not like you're at home working blah 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 to burn yourself out on something because you can work infinitely on something till you're sick of seeing it. I think you have to have a fresh set of eyes to reevaluate it. I can't tell you again. I mentioned earlier where I'm like work till like 4 a.m. on something where I'm spun out and it's not work. I don't do this much. But early in my career when I was younger, I would just beat my head against the wall and just stay late and work, go home frustrated. And come back the next day and either sometimes I would get lucky, but often I'd be like looking at what I was working on till 4 a.m. and be like, man, I made some bad decisions. It just doesn't look the same when you come in the next day. And it's usually from that same bit of burnout. So it's important to I was told the same thing when I was a young artist. I didn't really listen till later on. So I don't expect everybody to sneak it in because it's a hard thing to do. But honestly, that little bit of break is a big deal. Like it helps your eyes to come back and reassess the situation. So that would be my recommendation.
Ken?
Yeah, that pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah,
cool.
I agree. It is really difficult to kind of power through on something, even when taking a break sometimes. But yeah, I completely agree that like you learn so much from working around that and trying to find something about it that can kind of reinvigorate you and taking it a step back from it is it's the best way to do it because you might talk to someone or you might see something on the internet or you might go and see a movie that just like makes you think of something or makes you even just look at the piece from a different light or from a different perspective that kind of changes things. I think it was Jake Parker, or I don't know if he was the first person to say it, but he said a lot on his podcasts, or posting on social media that done is better than perfect. And yeah, he's totally right because You know, just the lessons learned from finishing a piece rather than, you know, you know, just sitting on something and noodling on it for months and months and months until it's perfect. Like it's so much better. But yeah.
That's a really good point. Finishing something after, like, I like, honestly, like, from my neck of the woods, like, no model is ever done. It's just due. So, like, everything,
Yeah.
everything can be better at all times. So, just to echo what Ken was just saying, I think it is important to just be like, hey, at some point this has got to be done. You know what I mean? And like, you know, and like, I can point to every single thing I've worked on, everything ever, and tell you in several areas think it could be way better. You know, so think about it like that, I guess.
Great, thanks. And the last question for the night. This is from J. Steven Restrepo. He asked, he has different styles of art in his portfolio, so very diverse range of styles, mostly in clay render. He asked, does this affect me when applying to a studio? I mean, I know studios like Blizzard and Pixar have very established styles, but what happens with other studios that have a variety of work that they perform?
Is this like for a 3D portfolio, I'm assuming?
I think that, yeah, it's more of a modeling.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let me
Well, I mean,
let me get this.
if it's just clay renders, like, you really, if you want to work in a studio, I don't know many that don't texture. Split that out anymore. I know there's probably a few texture artists that just paint still for certain reasons, but if you're going for that job, like, you got to have something that goes all through the process and demoing, like a PBR pipeline. I highly suggest you have that. I think it would hurt you applying for character work or any kind of position in that regard. At least one. I mean, like, you know, to demo that, I would suggest more than that, you know, but I mean, like I said, I'm going to say it again, like, I usually would suggest, if you're going for that job in the industry, is have 3 characters, one a monster, one a dude in gear, and then one maybe a little bit stylized. I think it well rounds out your portfolio, and you can tack a lot of studios with it. Or replace one of those characters in that 3 that is in the line of a specific studio you're targeting. You know, that's just my that's my loose suggestion for stuff. And I always tell people, you know, trying to get industry wise in that regard is to gather as much information as you can from any kind of interviews and stuff you can gather from other hiring people and what they're looking for, and you kind of got to combine that. Because what I'm looking for, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's at least like pretty lining with everybody else, but it's always gonna be a little specific per studio.
Right, and I think that's another great suggestion. It's yeah, when you start building your portfolio, you want to kind of just know the studio that you're applying for. So look at the work they're producing, and then yeah, that's the portfolio to match. So that's just my suggestion as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have one that kind of fits in with the places that you're applying to, rather than kind of having one portfolio with an image for, like, you know, every image in the portfolio is kind of meant for a different project or a different studio. I think I don't know, maybe Jason, you would agree, or I don't know, you have thoughts on this, but I kind of like to think of portfolios, like a portfolio is kind of a piece in itself. Like, looking at this portfolio, like looking at this almost as like one collection of works, like even if you're showing like different kind of genres or even different styles, I feel like there should still kind of be somewhat of a consistency through stylistic choices, or something that kind of communicates like who you are as an artist, and like what your personal affinities are, and your own like kind of preferences when it comes to like decision making and designs and stuff like that. So, you know, you can have maybe like Jason said, like a prop, a character, a creature, but like maybe like also like what, you know, like what is that one thing that kind of carries through regardless of the designs, right?
Yeah, like what Ken's saying is all like really good point. Like, have a little bit of you in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think like I really like portfolios where you can see that balance across the board. And also I think it's worth noting that, dude, like as a quality versus quantity, I'm always going to be at the quality level. I'd rather see like in like 2 models that were done awesome than 6 that were like meh, you know?
Yeah, totally.
That's why I look on my end from a modeling standpoint.
Right. It's like
And
so
I don't
most
want to
likely,
make this go. I'm going to jump.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go
go
for it,
ahead.
Travis. Oh no, I was
Oh, I
just
just wanted to
last.
jump.
Oh, go ahead, Travis. Sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. I just want to jump in on this because obviously I have an opinion as a co-owner in CG Society and just being on websites all day long. Because I do browse Polycount. Obviously, I browse ArtStation. I'm on DeviantArt digging at least twice a week to try to find the good stuff there. And I think something that is happening is that portfolios on websites like ArtStation and Polycount and CG Society, places anywhere that has them, they really are a contender as much as a demo reel now. That wasn't the case 5 years ago, but it really is now. And part of the issue with that is that everyone is calling their ArtStation or their CG Society or their whatever it is, DeviantArt. Everyone's calling that their portfolio. But there's a huge difference between a professional portfolio or a professional demo reel and a casual one. And so a lot of times, obviously you guys being here are mostly from the group that we started. And part of that is to kind of help you to compete with those around you. And so I'm always telling everybody, post on as many sites as you can. Don't post on one. You're going to hear the opposite from a lot of other people. If I'm an owner in CG Society and I'm telling you to post an ArtStation, you can probably take my word for being honest. And the reason is you're going to be discovered in different ways in different places. But another good thing that you can do is to make sure at least one of your portfolios, whatever portfolio you're going to send to the studio, is only the work that is representative of what you're applying to the studio with. So, if I'm looking at Steven Restrepo's portfolio here, am I looking at work that he thinks is professional? Am I looking at work that is from the past 6 months or the past 3 years? Am I looking at work that's for film or game or concept? If I come to this page and there's 4 images here and they all look like the boxer, I have a much better sense of who you are, who you're representing, your professional self, as opposed to, say, the boxer and the creature and the troll character. So, one thing that you can do is use one site for your work in progress for everything as a sketchbook. You could also do that on the same site. Obviously, you can create albums on your ArtStation, but I personally tend to think it's better to treat one site as a sketchbook. It's better to treat one site as a portfolio. You can also do that with your ArtStation website, your professional ArtStation website. My issue with the professional ArtStation website and your regular ArtStation is they tend to look very similar. So, sometimes I'm not sure if I'm landing on one or the other, but just keep that in mind when, you're presenting your work. What type of work are you presenting and who are you presenting it professionally? If you want to work in film and games or film or games, then that's good. But going with what Ken and these guys are saying, Jason as well, is that, one of the best things about demo reel is that when I go there and I see that first piece that you have, or I see the body of pieces that you have, they all look cohesively like they're for a specific studio, for a specific genre of games or film. So definitely think about that, guys, in your process too. So I just want to jump in on that part. I'm going to cut out now, guys, and go back to you.
Yeah. I think another just really quick thing is when a lead or an art director or a recruiter, hiring manager, anyone looks at your portfolio, it should answer questions. It shouldn't raise questions. Like they should know exactly what position you're applying for. They should know what project you want to work for. They should know, they should get a feel for what your taste is as an artist. It's when your portfolio starts to raise more questions than answer questions is when the portfolio kind of falls to the bottom of the stack. Or if the work is still really good, it's more likely that you'll do an art.
I got something to weigh in here. As I blanked out for a minute, listen, all this information is great. Like I'm literally digging through stuff, and here's what I found interesting that blew my mind. Honestly, think about this. So I really had to dig through like 200 applications like recently. I've still not gone through them all. So I basically get them from HR that's applied through a website, right? So my first thing that I get is a resume front head letter. You'd be surprised, but I'm talking senior level guys even didn't have like their portal. I had to dig for that information on their resume front page. You should have that thing really easy to like look up, because I'm me. Even the ones that didn't work, I was like, I still look them all up and find them. But I don't know if someone else will be that generous. So as corny as this sounds, having your portfolio as a really bold, easy place to be on the front page of your resume, not hidden, bold somewhere up top, which I'm sure most anywhere you read and follow, you'll see this stuff. But my point of even bringing this up is I'm literally digging through this and I'm seeing it on a lot. Like I'd say 2 out of 10 resumes are like, I'm like, where's the damn link or where's your portfolio to look at? And I have to dig for it. Or I can't even find it on the page.
And I'm jumping back in there on that note. We'll never end this thing because there's so much good stuff to talk about, right? and one note is that on Jason's and Ken's, all of the live demo reel workshops, myself and Hannah from Legacy will be doing a portfolio and demo reel workshop for one weekend that you have an off week with Jason and Ken. And we'll also be doing an interview and resume workshop. So we'll help you create your resume, which I think has a lot of value as well. But the thing I wanted to back up Jason in saying is that, Jason's looking for people to hire. I'm always looking for people that are doing strong work. I don't care where you post. I'm looking every single day because I help set up our departments and I have a website that features artists. So if you're a good artist, I want to send you a message that says, hey, I checked out your work today on Facebook. I checked out your work today on the cover of Polycount. I'd love to feature you on CD Society. And I literally on a daily basis go through at least 50 artists that have no contact information anywhere on their reel. I'm willing to bet if we click on 3 artists right now on ArtStation, we won't find an email to them. And it doesn't have to be your personal email. It can just be an email that you only use and put on public sites for interviews. But this is something that is, every single artist out there seems to be failing getting into the industry, and it's very hard to communicate to get there. So I'm going to back up Jason on this big time. Because Jason, I imagine it's really frustrating.
It is. I mean, I've literally, I'm not going to call it out, but I've actually seen senior level guys. I mean, I think they're just not like thinking or whatever, but it's just like I kind of like got a kick out of it. But mostly, honestly, that was kind of a rare, like kind of like goof on. See, it's mostly junior guys though that I see this. They just don't have that. Like it's just make it readily, easily available. That's all I'm saying.
Cool. I think that's a wrap, Michael. What do you guys think? Thank you so much for spending the time tonight, guys, and thank you so much for everybody joining in. And Michael, this was great for the first one we're rolling out. I'm looking forward to doing a lot of these.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, and thank you for your time, guys. And just a quick note, in the chat, you can see the course links to Jason's course and also Ken's course. So if you're interested, if this is for you, please sign up. Class begins on February 18th for Jason, and I think Ken, your class starts soon as well. So
for 18th.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks to the audience once again, and hope you all have a good night or wherever you're tuning in from.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone, and thanks for having us be on. I appreciate it.
All right, see you guys.
Yep, have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a good night.